Doctors with Little Miss Can't Be Wrong here on LRS102.com. And I'm so happy because right now we are joined on the phone line. Dan Shinder, Drum Talk TV co-founder, drummer extraordinaire. He's also an awesome husband. And he was just telling me, Dan, remind me, how many kids do you have?
My wife and I have 11 combined kids
963
and 19 grandkids.
That is amazing. Here's where my hand clap. I need my hand clap button to come in again. That is crazy. Did you plan on like world domination with your children, or what did you plan to have that many?
I think it was the other way around. They planned it with us.
Oh, they did.
I have 4, and my wife has 4 and adopted 3, so that's 11 altogether. But they're all older than we are now. The youngest is 40. The youngest is 25. The oldest is 42.
Wow.
It's a football team.
That is a football team. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And
so, a dude to hold the flag.
Yeah, that's right.
A dude to hold the flag. I love that. So, Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself. I've been a big fan for a long time. I subscribe to Drum Talk TV. Sean was telling me he also does that on YouTube.
Absolutely, love it.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, we're big fans. You find the most interesting old school drummer videos and post them, and I'm always like reposting them. And you've been doing this for a long time, and you also run, is it social media on steroids?
Yes.
Yeah.
Drum Talk TV started officially January 1st of 2013. And I'm the creator, the founder, and we've grown a lot since just me, myself, and I were the staff, which is great. And in the first year, I had such great growth organically without ever paying for ads or boosting posts that I decided to start another company to show people how I do this. So since the first year, I've had social media on steroids, and I've worked with gold and platinum artists. I've worked with up-and-coming bands. I've worked with inventors of musical instruments or gadgets, as well as really big brands, and also have branched out even outside of the music industry and work with some pretty high-profile entrepreneurs and different companies in other industries. And I really, really enjoy that. As you know, I have a series of books that is designed for musicians as far as social media marketing and stuff, and I speak about it at every NAMM show. We're actually going to the Summer NAMM show for the first time next week. I'd never been, but they asked me to speak at it, so I said, "Oh yeah, we're going." So I'm going to go.
That's crazy.
Check it out, and
yeah,
it's a lot of fun. And Drum Talk TV has grown over all these 6 years and 7 months now to over 1 million followers, and on Facebook alone. And of course, we have a presence on YouTube, on Vimeo, on Instagram. We haven't used Twitter in a few years. We're going to fire it back up next year.
Oh, I love my Twitter.
But it's a lot of fun.
I can't Twitter. I can't. I'm having a tough time with it.
Oh, yeah? Well, it's funny because I got on Twitter when it first came out and kind of figured it out before, like, some of the other social media platforms. So I really love Twitter, and it's really cool. Interesting. Yeah, and you can kind of set it to, it's more of like a celebrity thing, I feel like. But I have a lot of really cool podcasts that I like to listen to off of Twitter.
I got lost on Twitter one time. I don't know if that makes sense, but I was literally lost on Twitter. I'm like, I'm just going to close the app. I don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, you can go down the wormhole.
I did.
Yeah,
I was in the
you could
wormhole.
definitely do that. Dan,
yeah.
So, Dan, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your drumming career because, I'm a drummer.
Okay.
This show has been featuring drummers every week. I've got female drummers and male drummers and drummers from all over the world and local drummers and everybody in talking drums, basically. But how did you get your start in drumming?
So this goes way back to when I was real little and the earth was still cooling. I was like 6 years old. So this was like, I was born in 63. I'm 56. So we're looking at like 1969. I had
great year.
Two cousins that are older than me. One is 7 years older who was a drummer, and the other was 6 years older. And they were listening to all the breaking music at the time, Zeppelin and the Beatles and Pink Floyd and all that stuff. So as a little boy, spending time with them for a few weeks at a time during the summer, I got exposed to this sort of music. But then when I saw my cousin play the drums, I was like, I really want to do that. And I wanted to be a musician. when my parents were alive, my mother used to tell this story that I don't remember, but she said that one day an accordion salesman came to the door, like a door-to-door salesman, and said, "I'm selling accordions and accordion lessons." My mom said, "No, thank you." She said, "I jumped up and down screaming for an hour. I'm going to miss my chance. I'm going to miss my chance." And
To
I
play
don't
accordion?
remember this. To be a star, I guess.
Ah,
Or play
that's
accordion
amazing.
and play the Hollywood Bowl and the accordion. I have no idea what I was thinking at 4 or 5 years old. But when I saw my cousin playing the drums, I told my parents, I said, "I want to play the drums. I really want to play the drums." So they were crazy enough to sign me up for lessons and get me a practice pad. And they said, "If you stick with it, we'll get you a drum set." And after about, I want to say three, so I'm 7 now, I turned 7.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 3 months, they got me my first drum set, a 5-piece drum set. And
Nice.
I've been married to drums ever since. And back then, here's what's interesting, since we're on radio and talking
Sure.
radio and music. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley part of Los Angeles. And back then, 1970, that area, and even after that, music was not segregated by genre the way it is today. So as a little boy sitting at the drum set, I'd turn on my stereo and tune in to the hip station, which was 95 KHJ back then.
Yeah.
And I'd put on my headphones and I'd play to whatever came on. Well, back then, there could be a Bobby Sherman song, followed by a Led Zeppelin song, followed by Sly and the Family Stone, and so on. And you'd just be playing to this mix
Can we
of
make
music.
LRS that station, by the way? I'd love
Yeah,
that. Would be awesome.
I know. We're talking about we
need
love
that.
all of those, and we
Yeah.
want to make LRS the station you're on right now, just like that.
That's it.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to see stations do that, because
Yeah.
what it did for me as a new musician is it introduced me to music
Well
without any of the bias or stereotypes about, oh, well, it's labeled this, or it's
Right.
this genre, and you should be playing this or listening to that. I just played to whatever came on, and it served me really well as I got older, and then played in like concert band at school and Tuesday night jazz band, to where I could pretty much play to anything that
Yeah.
I wanted to play, because I developed really good ears, and
Yeah.
then it was just a matter of teaching my hands and legs how to do what I heard.
Yeah, Sean was just saying very well versed, and
Yeah.
learning different styles of music will teach you different things. We were talking earlier about how, like, jazz typically doesn't like drummers to hit on the count one. Where like in rock and roll, it's more about the 2 and the 4 backbeat.
Funk is
Right.
the one.
Reggae halftime is all about the count 3. It just depends on the style of music. Everything has a different thing to offer.
Exactly. And so then
A
I,
potpourri per se.
potpourri.
yeah, that's a great
Yes.
way to put it. And then I started playing professionally, actually, when I was 15. My mother found an audition for a singing group needing a drummer to go on tour. So she said, "Do you want to check it out?" I said, "Yeah." So the other drummer was going to be leaving. He actually was the son of Al Lohman, the famous radio DJ from Lohman and Barkley back in the 60s and 70s. And Al Lohman Jr. was going to be leaving, and it was 2 weeks before the tour. So I went to this audition but never played. I watched them play. But what it was, Jin and Sean, it was like a singing group, kind of like Up With People, with a bass player, piano player who was the director, and a drummer. So my mom and I are the only people in this auditorium watching them rehearse, and they're playing stuff like Neil Diamond, ABBA, Linda Ronstadt. And at 15, I'm playing Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And I lean over to my mom and I said, "Mom, I really don't want to play this kind of music." And she turned to me and grabbed me by the shirt with both hands and shook me like a cartoon. And she says, "What difference does it make what kind of music it is? They're going to pay you to go on tour and see the country. Your father and I could never take you on a trip like that. I thought you wanted to be a musician." And it occurred to me at that moment, it doesn't matter what kind of music. So at 15, 2 weeks later, I learned an hour and a half of music. And I toured the United States playing state fairs, opening for bands like the Osmonds, Styx, Blue Oyster Cult, Hearts, Pat
Wow.
Boone even. Yeah,
That's
it was
amazing,
crazy.
man. And you were only
It
15 years old?
I was 15, and they asked me back the next summer. And then by then, I was in my first rock band with 3 other older guys playing a 4-hour show that was 80% Led Zeppelin, and
Perfect.
just kind of went on from there and did the record deal hunt with a progressive rock band I was in. And we were this was now the early 80s. The band was called Opus One. We used to play up and down the Sunset Strip. But our problem was we were too snooty to want to conform to what was happening. And back then, progressive rock was dying in the United States, and everyone was either putting on hairspray and spandex or a real thin tie and a short haircut, because new wave and hair metal was coming out.
I love new wave and hair metal. Yeah, we've been talking about hair metal
and
all day.
progressive rock. So
and
it's like,
progressive
we
rock.
need that radio station once again.
Yeah, but at the time, we were playing like the Whiskey, the Roxy, Madame Wong's, the Troubadour, and we were
What year was that?
with bands.
About what year was that?
This is like 82 through 84.
We were in LA at the time. My dad was frequenting those clubs, so I'm sure
we've
he
been
was
talking
there.
about the whiskey and our experiences in LA and all this cool stuff today.
Oh, it's perfect. So we were opening or playing with bands like Great White, Motley Crue, all these
That's
bands
right, on their way up.
And we just ignored it, and we just kind of literally lost our chance, I think. And I personally, and I was the youngest one in the band, I was really upset and disillusioned. But at the same time, honestly, and this is not to discourage anybody in music, but just for where I was in my space at the time, I was in another band after that was more of a commercial rock band. But I got to the point where I was tired of being married to 3 or 4 other idiots and their significant other drama.
Been there, done that.
Once or twice, 20 times.
Yeah, a few times.
So I moved from being a drummer in a band, writing originals and doing all that stuff, to grooming bands that were younger than me, producing them, and producing music and voiceovers for commercials. I had an audio production company for a few years called Synergy West Productions. And then I was doing a bunch of session work. I was doing work at NFL Films in New Jersey. And then as I got married and had kids, and then got married again and had kids, I just sort of got away from it all and went into the corporate world.
I was like, did you have to? Because you had 11 mouths to feed, man. You had a lot of kids.
Well, I
15
didn't
jobs
have
to
all
feed all those
those
people.
kids yet. I had my 4, and I did have to, feed those kids. Plus, getting divorced even the first time I had that extra bill.
Right.
But then what happened was later on when I was, so this is 2002, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm really into food and cooking. I should weigh 300 pounds, but I weigh 150. I don't know how I still have my 20-year-old metabolism, but I used to watch the Food Network all the time, and I had this idea for a cooking show. And instead of trying to figure out how to develop it and sell it, I joined the local access cable station where I was living in Ventura, California, and I brought to fruition this vision I had of a cooking show that was called Chew on This. And
I love that.
Yeah, and in the first year, it won Best New Show on that station, and in 2 years, I was in 63 stations in the Southwest. And the significance of this is where I learned about video. Then after the cooking show, I went into corporate video production with my own company. I ended up going to Australia and living there for 2 years, working with the Sydney to Hobart, having corporate gigs. And then I came home. And I told my wife, I said, I don't want to work with big clients anymore. Let me just work with you and do your marketing. And my wife is a visual artist. And so she said, okay. So I did that for about 3 months. And she said, I think you should find something that really fills your cup. And the thought bubble above
Basically,
her head
get
said,
out of my hair.
Yeah, I think you need to find someone else
Right.
to play with. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what to do. I was 49 and had no idea what to do. And she said, well, why don't you give drum lessons? And when she said that, I thought, wow, I know how to give drum lessons. I used to do that. And I know video production, and I am a trained trainer. So I'll have an online lessons thing. So I did this online lessons thing for 6 months called Dan's Drum Clinics. And it was either around that time or towards the end of that, or the very beginning of Drum Talk TV, where Jyn, you and I connected on Facebook and
Right.
started talking.
Right.
And then one day after 6 months of Dan's Drum Clinics, I was leaving. We lived in Vegas. That's where I started the company. I was leaving to go down to San Diego to visit my sons, and my wife saw a bunch of Pelican cases by the door, and she said, "What's up with that? I thought you weren't working." And I said, "Oh, on the way down, I'm going to stop in Temecula and interview." And I mentioned this guy and this guy who were also drumming teachers, and one plays in a band. She said, "What do you mean interview him?" And I said the magic words that became what Drum Talk TV is all about. I said, "Well, I just have this view that drummers can learn from more than just sitting at their drum set or a practice pad. They can learn from each other's experiences based on their unique perspectives." And that became Drum Talk TV. And even she said at the time, she said, "That's what you should be doing, is interviews." Because she saw me do interviews in another industry. And I said, "No, it's woman, it's all about the lessons. Come on. Go make
Dan,
me a sandwich."
we are
you know.
leaving. I was going to say, me and you are leading like almost parallel lives, minus the kid
Oh,
part.
wow. Oh,
Well,
that's
because,
cool.
you know, I was a drummer. I actually worked in
Yeah.
radio for many years. I also worked for Warner Brothers, where I learned to do a lot of video stuff. My dad always said he figured that if I didn't pursue music, I would be making movies, because from the time I was a
Wow.
kid, I was always around video, and I was very, you know, this is back before, you know, CDs and stuff. It was tape cassette decks, and I was always learning to
Yeah.
dub stuff over and making cassette tapes for my family to take out on the boat to listen to like it was my own radio show. And then I got my own radio show at 16, and then
That
did the
is, I remember learning
yeah,
that.
and then did the TV stuff. I had my own shows and all this cool stuff, so I learned to interview very young. But I left at age 30 to pursue my love of teaching music, which I've done for the
Awesome.
past 10 years pretty successfully, and now I have my own business doing that. And then
Yeah.
I personally came down to LRS, which I think I educated a little bit on what LRS is. We have been
Yes.
around since 1964. They were the prime radio station for rock and roll music from the 60s till current. And so we did a little stint where the station went under for about 10 years. And then they're reviving it now for online and
That's
stuff.
awesome.
So I come in for my own interview, and then they're like, "Hey, you worked in radio for 17 years. We need somebody from 2 to 4 every day. Would you want your own show?" And that's how I ended
That's
up here.
so cool.
Isn't that wild? So I kind of relate to your
is.
story about the interviewing and the learning the video, because I've noticed you must, be a technological kind of genius, because you always have the best like views on your, when you're doing your videos, because I've had a lot of trouble with this, like finding a great space, finding the right camera angles. You even sometimes have the camera on your foot. There are just things
Yeah.
that I haven't been able to achieve that you have, and I was like, man, this guy is so good. So I can
thank
tell.
you.
I can
Thanks.
tell from watching your station there that you really got it going on with the social media stuff, as well as the video technology, all that.
Thank
everything.
you. I really appreciate that. My wife really saw what Drum Talk would be before I did, because like I said, I was like, no, it's all about the lessons. But then I came back and we watched those videos, and we're watching it. She's punching me in the arm saying, see? And I said, you know what? Okay, I get it. And then that December, I kind of dissolved Dan's Drum Clinics and did a couple interviews. My first 2 interview guests were Glenn Sobel, then Brian Tichy,
Wow.
and then started Drum Talk TV as a actual corporation, and covered my first NAMM show that January, and it took off from there, and it keeps taking off, and we're actually getting ready to go through a major expansion in the next by beginning of 2020, we're going to be able to announce some really amazing things that we're doing. And in the meantime, one of the things that we do, if you don't mind, I'll explain real quick what Drum Talk TV does for those who don't know.
Sure.
So we do interviews, and I do most of them, but we do interviews with artists and educators. We also curate videos from our fans from over 130 countries, and they go through a submissions and screening process. And then we also curate other industry news. We cover events like the NAMM show and now the Singapore Drum Fest. I covered the Art of Rhythm section retreat by Billy Cobham the first 2 years and helped run it, made a documentary each year. And now we've really gotten more into covering events. We're actually leaving in a couple weeks to go to Pakistan, of all places, and
Wow.
do a documentary on a music event in the Pasu Mountains, which is at 10,000 feet. And then after
That is
we go.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited
We'll
to
be
watch
posting.
that if you post it out. Yeah.
No, definitely. And then we go straight to Japan to cover a taiko drumming festival on Sado Island. And then from there, we go to the Singapore Drum Fest for the third year in a row, where we cover the event, we stream it live, we make a documentary, and do interviews with artists. And we've had artists involved with that event, such as in the past, Maytal Cohen, Yost Nickel. I'm total senior moment. Who else?
I call that
a lot of-
sometimers. Yeah. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we had oh gosh, what's the young blonde short hair Luke
Oh, the
Holland?
girl?
Yeah,
Oh.
Luke Holland we had last year. Luke was great. We had Senri Kawaguchi from Japan, who's just amazing. So it's been a fun event, and my wife now, she only works for Drum Talk TV when we cover live events. And in those cases,
love
she's
it.
the production manager, den mother, and my babysitter, basically.
Man, I need to
She's
find
still
a
trying-
wife.
Does she still try to throw you out of the house when she's tired of you?
What's that?
She still trying to
What
throw you out of the house when she's tired of you?
Did you hear him?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, man, I'm totally like doing this wrong. I need to find a wife
Yeah, there you go.
that'll
She's
support
been
my
on-
drum talk,
Yeah.
my drumming stuff. No, I got a couple of questions for you, Dan. Are you
Okay,
hip
sure.
to the new women drummers documentary film that's about to drop in September in theaters?
Oh yeah, I'm a big part of that, actually.
I thought you were.
Yeah.
We had Cindy Goldberg on the show last week from Canada, who's filming it.
Yeah.
She also
Yeah.
filmed me for a big feature in it. So I think, I can't wait for that to come out. But it's supposedly like this
Yes.
2-hour documentary on, guys and females talking about how gender does not affect playing and stuff like that, and
Yeah,
and the struggles that women
absolutely.
go through to try to equal their male counterparts, basically.
If I could chime in on that, because
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to that topic. I have 2 daughters of my own and 4 daughters that are stepdaughters, and
Yeah.
I had a mom who worked, and from the very beginning of Drum Talk TV, it's one of my missions of the brand has been to give women and girls an equal platform, and we don't look at them differently. And I've gone out of my way to feature them and interview them, and I'm still wanting to expand that quest. And I met Cindy shortly before the last Winter NAMM show because I'm the only man that's part of the Drummer Girls United.
Yeah, I was gonna say something
Yeah.
about that. And by the way, Tammy Mitchell Woods, who founded that group, is on the show tomorrow, calling in from
awesome.
from Oklahoma.
Great.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great.
yeah. So I'm a big fan of hers. She's like a Christian
Oh,
rock
yeah.
drummer. Yeah,
Yeah. So Cindy saw that I posted in the group saying, "Hey, I want as many of my drummer sisters that are going to the NAMM show to come to the Drum Talk TV booth Saturday at 2:00. We're going to do a big get together. I'll do kind of a group interview thing." So Cindy reached out to me at that time and said, "Hey, I'm making this documentary." She explained what it was. "May I film independently, separate from what you're doing? May I film this gathering at the Drum Talk TV booth?" I said, "Absolutely. And not only that, I'll give you all the footage." And I hooked her up with some people that are in the documentary, like Jared Falk and Todd Zuckerman of Styx, and some people, so I guess my
there's some
point is
major players in that documentary. I'm
Yeah.
very honored to be a part of it. In
same
fact,
here.
In fact,
Very
I'm
honored.
along the same lines as you. Since I've gotten this radio show, and I get to interview musicians, I wanted to feature drummers and women drummers, especially the ones in the documentary. So I have had call-ins lined up, from now until forever, of some of these
That's
chicks who
awesome.
are out on tour, and they're calling in. Some of them are like out opening for Aerosmith and all kinds of, touring all over the place. So I've had them call in. So it's really cool to have the platform to just, help educate others about stuff like that
Yes.
too. You know what I mean? And give drummers
Oh,
another voice.
Definitely. It's
Yeah.
very important. And for any female drummers out there listening, or anybody that knows female drummers, please, if you go to drumtalktv.com, on the top right, there's a contact us button. When you click on contact us, there's 3 different categories, and one of them is our video submissions portal. And in there are the tips and guidelines how to submit. And then there's a form, and then it goes to the submissions department, and they watch your video to make sure it just meets the guidelines. And we will feature you. We have over 1 million followers, and I'd love to get more girls, ladies, grandmas, whomever,
Yeah.
any style, it doesn't matter. We'd love to feature more and more and more women. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
and
half of my staff is women too that work for Drum Talk TV.
That's
actually.
amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, have you ever gotten to meet Viola Smith, by the way?
Oh, I interviewed her when she was
So jealous.
102. So
She's 106
that
now and
interview
still
is
playing.
on the Drum Talk TV website, and it also gets posted probably once a month on our Facebook page. She's an absolute treasure.
I tell you what,
That
I
was probably one of my most meaningful interviews I've ever done, and I think
bet.
the reason why isn't because she's like other artists that have 10 gold records or anything like that,
Yeah.
but to sit and talk with someone who's a centurion and has seen so many changes throughout the ages, let alone changes in the music industry, let alone changes in gear, let alone changes on how you listen to music, buy music, record music.
The different styles, even.
The most honored experience I think I've ever had in my Drum Talk TV career. I really mean that.
Well, Dan, you know, I was featured in the Women Drummers book, A History, and that book literally is all about Viola Smith. I mean, she's 106 right now. She's still playing. She played with Frank Sinatra. Her YouTube videos are amazing from, like, you know, back in the day. I mean, she
absolutely.
was just incredible. And I send her a birthday card every year and thank her for
good.
everything she's done for women drummers, because she is like the true first female, I call them sheroes or pioneers, you know, of the female drumming industry. And,
and
I would
in
love
fact-
to land an interview with her because, I mean, she's 106 and she's
Yeah,
still drumming. It's
I
amazing.
will be happy to connect you with the person that arranged that.
That would be
for
awesome.
her.
Magic just
Yeah, I'll
happened.
do
I
that.
know
And
it did.
also, the
Connections.
video that we feature of her is of her playing in 1939. I think she was like 20 or 18
Wow.
at the time or something. I haven't done the math, but
Mind-blowing.
it's awesome. It's an all-female orchestra.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're
Big
all sitting
fan.
behind her, and she almost has like those taiko drums too, off the
Yes.
side. What do you call those? Are those taiko, like Japanese drums?
They're not. They were popular in like during the 50s and much earlier. And there's a name for them. I just can't remember. But they were like tom toms before there were proper drum sets.
Yeah,
When they
this
were
is-
really. Using
I mean, can you
animal skins that
imagine?
were riveting.
Okay,
I know.
so the
Yeah.
kick drum was invented in what, 1908 or 1910?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, right in there.
I was going to say, I mean, she's been around to see that happen pretty much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She was around when the first kick drum came out that actually introduced us and allowed drummers to play a kick drum or bass drum with a snare drum, you know, instead of the old school double drumming styles. I mean,
Yeah.
gosh, she has lived through everything from jazz to bebop to vaudeville to, you know, I mean, just, and I would love to know what she
lived-
thinks about like rap and hip hop, you know, just because
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Think about this, and this is why it was so special to sit with her. She has lived through the entire evolution of the freaking aeroplane and then going to the moon and the space shuttle. I mean, can you imagine seeing that
No,
in your
I can't.
lifetime?
I can't, but I would love to
Crazy.
talk to her because, I mean, she's just a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and
drumming,
I-
I mean, the fact that she still continues to play and we have videos of her continuing to play is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
It
only
is.
40, but I mean, my body has gone downhill and I can't even do things that I used to. So I'm like, I can't even imagine being 106.
I
You know?
know.
It's
Gosh.
mind-blowing.
I still love playing more than ever.
Me
I'm
too,
not
I
in a
do too.
band. I rarely get a chance to play with other musicians. So I don't and that's just because I'm just so busy with Drum Talk TV, and we moved to this tiny little town in the mountains in Arizona, so it's not exactly a musician's mecca, but there are some musicians here I play with from time to time, but for the most part, like my wife says, I'm just playing with myself.
Yeah.
Or,
That sounds kinky.
It happens.
Yeah, I'll put on, CDs of my favorite music that honestly, I've been playing to the same stuff for the last 49 years. I'm just starting to learn some new music.
Wow.
But I just still love playing to, like I'm doing a live today on the Drum Talk TV Facebook page at 1:30 Pacific, and I'm going to play to some ELP just because and talk about dynamics and what my method has been of learning. I love playing long songs, old epics by ELP, Genesis, Pink Floyd, stuff like that. And people always say, "How do you remember all such long pieces?" So I have two methods that I'm going to talk about today. One of them is I say to people, well, how long is the set you do with your band? They say an hour, 2 hours. They say, well, how do you remember that? It's the same thing, except it's one song taking up the space of 4 or 5 for 20 minutes. It's the same thing. But part of my method is I have always learned, no matter what music I'm listening to, I've always learned to be able to sing or hum the parts of every instrument playing the song. So if we're talking, let's just say, Close to the Edge by Yes, I could sing the entire bass part, the entire keyboard part, all the guitar. I could just sing.
You're
every part.
well, you're a producer, because producers, when you're producing other artists, because I produce a lot too, over the years,
true.
you have to, if you're tracking, if you're looking at your recording system or whatever you're using to record into, you're looking at each individual track. Obviously, you want absolute isolation if you can get it. So you're looking. You have to look at it like that. A vocal. This vocal. This is a bass line. That's a kick drum.
And I tell you what, something else too, Dan. The best drummers I've ever been able to play with have always had a knack for being able to hear the melodies. A drummer that keeps a beat is totally different than a drummer that can hear the melody while they're playing, because I've had drummers over time they'll have a guitar player that'll play a little riff, and he'll start to pick that he played that last time we did that. Next time I do it, I'm going to flash it with him, right? So they can actually hear the melody and they play off that melody instead of just keeping a beat.
Bonham would do that.
The dynamics come into play, especially in live. When you're playing live and those dynamics come into play and they hear those melodies and they start to flash with those melodies. That is so important.
Or answer back almost.
It's funny, like when as a singer, as a vocalist, I'll hear my guys connect like that. And they'll hear each other play something, and I'm like, oh, you sons of bitches, that's awesome. I'm looking. I see you. I see you.
So
don't worry, we're gonna have to put about 20 or 30 bucks in there for the end of the day.
I think what's so genius about that is it really affects how the drummer understands and adapts to the phrasing of the music, whether it's the phrasing of the guitar or the vocals. And I was going to mention, and Jyn mentioned that John Bonham did that. So if you listen to the live version from the movie or the soundtrack of The Song Remains the Same, there's a lot of elements of what John is doing between the bass drum and snare is mimicking some of the stuff during the solo and coming out of the guitar solo of the guitar, especially that part that goes
on my way here
playing
today.
The same thing on the drums.
On my way here today, I thought about this specific topic because that I wanted to talk about this. Jyn being a drummer and myself being a rhythmic singer, I wanted to talk about how it is so important for drummers to be able to hear those melodies and play off those melodies, because a drummer keeping a beat is just totally different for me, especially live in a live setting, than a drummer that can phrase with the melodies.
Yeah, and I want to intervene just a little bit. I mean, I studied music in college and am very theory-based. If you are a drummer, drums are actually, piano is a percussion instrument. So it's the number one percussion instrument. So if you go to college and you study drums, you must play piano really well. So you must know melody lines, and you must be able to read melody lines. And when I'm sitting in theaters and orchestras, reading these pieces, a lot of times the drummers, we have pitch percussion parts. So we usually end up with like a third or fourth piano part that we have to play just because they don't have enough players. When you're playing crow tallies, you've got to read melody lines. You know, and I love to educate my kids on theory because rhythm is the foundation. You can have rhythm without a melody, but you cannot have a melody without
the
rhythm.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I almost did harmony.
I think
when
it's
I sang harmony.
crazy that
yeah.
yeah, I've heard from some drummers that they don't even bother to learn the words to songs. And I can't even begin to explain how that escapes me.
Me too.
When you learn the melodies and you learn the words and you learn the other instruments, that is called context. And how do you be the best drummer you can for the music if you don't understand what everyone else is doing?
Well, and the lyrics, I always teach my students, that's usually the message that is portrayed in the song. So you don't want to cover that up, and I teach them you want to blend with the band and not like be out in front volume-wise, because what people come to hear is what's being said almost always. If they're coming to see like a cover band or a band, a band, I'm not talking about like an orchestra or something, but if they're coming to see a band, they want to hear the message in the lyrics, and that is the message. You know what I mean? So I love lyrics.
Absolutely.
I love lyrics. I love to write lyrics.
Me too.
So that escapes me too, because a lot of times I will, in my head, if I haven't written out the piece, because I love to make my little notes. I'm a little anal like that. And then once I get my notes and I learn the song, then I throw them away.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But a lot of the times I know where to go because of when the lyrics are hitting, or what's being said in the song. So that escapes me too.
Yeah, which verse is this? Well, you can tell by what the lyrics are. Mm-hmm. If you daydream, I don't know. Do you guys ever daydream when you play? I daydream all the time.
I do, and I end up forgetting words. I sang a song 500 times, and I'll forget the words because I end up daydreaming right in the middle.
and in like
I had a major problem with that, actually, Dan. I wanted to real quick, and I'll let you finish, but
sure.
There are certain drumming tempos and certain drumming rhythms that can put you into trance-like state. I have studied this from like the voodoo Haitian drummers and all that. Mickey Hart talks a lot about it from the Grateful Dead, because he's kind of on a different planet with drums. But I found myself drumming so much that the muscle memory would just kick in, and I wouldn't even I'd be on another plane in my mind. Well, I went to therapy, and my therapist said, you have a hard time staying present. And so what she recommended me doing was taking a musical and reading a 200-page score, because she says what's better to make, if you're having trouble staying present when you're playing because you float and daydream, and I do often, I had to make it like a conscious effort to stay present. So I started taking musicals because of that. And now I'm like 20 plus deep into, different musicals and orchestra stuff. And, because when you're reading 200 pieces of music a night and it's the same show over and over and over again, if you get lost, if you daydream for a second, you're gone, because some of those are switching time signatures, switching songs. There's constant music going on underneath underscore, So I literally went to therapy and started taking musicals to learn to stay present because of that exact reason that you're talking about, the daydreaming thing.
That's interesting.
Very.
I find myself like kind of wandering off if I'm playing one of the many things that I've been playing forever, because then, like you were saying, my body just goes on autopilot, and I start thinking about, what are we going to get when we go shopping, or what should I make for dinner, or whatever. And it's the lyrics that help me find my place. If I realize that I drifted off, I'm like, I just listen to the lyrics and I know which verse we're on and what part of the song I'm in. It's that simple. So I don't know how someone doesn't learn the words to a song.
Same.
Or find that valuable, right?
Yeah, I agree. Well, Dan, listen, we're going to have to wrap this up, but is there anything, if people want to get a hold of you, or they want to...
Yeah, Drum Talk TV.
DrumTalkTV.com.
And then if you follow us on Facebook, you'll see all the stuff I mentioned that happens, including curating stuff from our fans. If anyone's interested in learning social media marketing as a musician, whether it's from my really easy books, or if you want one-on-one coaching with me, you can go to socialmediamarketingformusicians.com, and it's all there. And I so much appreciate you having me on.
Man,
and
I
Sean,
appreciate
thank
you
for
coming
being with
on
us as well.
Yeah, it's always
absolutely.
fascinating. And I tell you what, I'll talk to you after we get off air, but I will totally like check in with you on occasion because I'm always looking for interesting guests, and I love to talk drums and theory and playing. And you have so many connections all over the world. I mean, you have over 1 million followers on Drum Talk TV. And like you said, you have contacts to Viola Smith. Hook that up. That's pure magic, man.
And I got all kinds of crazy stories too.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to hear them all. We just don't have time today. So I tell you what, I'd like to
do this again.
Yeah. So every now and a blue moon, I'd love to schedule you in to just check in on a phone interview and you talk about, everything that's going on with Drum Talk TV and so forth.
I'd be honored, and I really appreciate you thinking of me and having me on.
All right. Well, that's Dan Shinder, Drum Talk TV co-founder and social media on steroids and father of 11 kids.
The only founder.
The only founder. Okay.
Yeah.
The only founder, the inventor of. Yes, and father of 11 kids?
11 kids and 19 grandkids.
Wow. Well,
Sheesh.
Good luck with that. You've got that whole football team kick in there. Plus the flag holders, right? Plus the flag holders.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, you
Thanks,
take
Jen.
care, and we'll be talking to you soon.
All right, Sean, take care. Thanks, bud.
See
for
you,
joining.
Dan. Nice to meet you, man.
Yeah.
You too.
Bye, Dan.
Bye-bye.
So, Sean, what do you think about that? Dan is a very interesting character, isn't he?